Hail, criminal scum. So, Oblivion, obviously in the news right now, what with the excellent remaster. At least I believe it's an excellent remaster. I haven't actually played it yet, so I can't comment on the quality of it. However, everyone else seems to be enjoying it, so this seems like a timely time to release this, the what I believe to be the theme, the story of Oblivion, the apex of empire, and how sort of once you reach such a lofty height, the only place to go is inevitably down. And I think that's basically what the story of Oblivion is about. And it, not just even the main story, but like every aspect of it. There's a lot of talk about how Skyrim is about decay and kind of the Nordic cycles of renewal, which it obviously is. But I think Oblivion is really about sort of the turning of the wheel, sort of leading into that end of days that they're sort of speaking about, and how, because this is sort of like, this is kind of like a big finale of the Elder Scrolls up to that point. Like all four games, Arena, Daggerfall, Morrowind, and then Oblivion, have like the strong central current of Uriel's septum running through them and him like picking champions to like do his bidding. And this game starts off with him dying, and we've gone to the heart of the empire, and how his sons are all dead, and you know the empire is on its last legs, despite being at the height of its powers. And we're gonna sort of get into that, but I want to strengthen my argument by showing it in sort of every aspect of it. So, if we talk about the guilds of Oblivion, first of all, sort of lay out the society that we find Cyrodiil to be in. Uh, the Fighters Guild, once a proud organization, is on its sort of decline. What with its rivalry with the Blackwood Company, and how they sort of like so desperately looking for recruits, they'll pretty much take anyone, and how they'll resort to torture and bribery and betrayal, because they're in it for money. They're butchers for hire. They're like the Dark Brotherhood, but except less. I don't even want to say fanatical because they're no less bloodthirsty, but they are definitely like they're just as societally accepted. They murder you by looking you in the face, and to be fair, they fight more monsters, but they're mercenaries, and they're on the decline. Obviously, you as the player are able to like side with them. Well, actually, you can't side with the Blackwood Company. You're able to side with. I don't think you can. You can sort of restore them to glory. That's the thing. Like Oblivion, like you can become the leader of basically every single guild, and that is another thing that's like, oh my god, why are you able to do that? And I think it's because it's about the turning of the wheel. Again, it's a change of leadership. It's how, oh, there's these old institutions have become rotten, and you are sort of coming in as like this force of change and either like putting things to bed or this force of renewal. I think because the emperor even like says at the start, like, if you ask why are you in prison, he'll say, uh, "It does not matter. Perhaps the gods placed you here so that we may meet. What you have done is not what you will be remembered for." Sort of saying, like, the past is in the past, the present is now, and what we do now will determine the future. And that leads into like the Mages Guild as well, which is also like, will basically has a slightly higher critique of like who they want to take in, but like it's going back to their origin of like, oh, the Worm King, the necromancy, and how like, oh, this institution has gotten like so uppity of its own ass that's like, oh, we're gonna ban necromancy, and Hannibal Traven is like just the epitome of arrogance, and like obviously he genuinely believes in like the morality of the situation, but like it's like he does not see how it's like if he just lifted the ban, this whole situation of like these cultists would just go away. It's like the drug problem. If you legalization, you'd be fine. But now he stands his ground, and again, you sort of have to side with him. But then you become the leader of the guild, and I suppose like the future is then up to you. And So they're not really on the decline, but like they're like they've been splintered. They're on the run, and the thieves guild is another thing. Like obviously because like the corruption of like the counts of around Cyrodiil is pretty bad. They're complicit in so many things. In Leowyn, they're just straight up torturing Argonians, kidnapping them and murdering them. The Count of Cheydinhal, just fully aware that the Dark Brotherhood is in his city, does nothing against them. To be fair, they'd kill him, but take a moral stance. The Count of Anvil, who has gone missing, was the leader of the thieves, was in the thieves guild at the very least, and then became the leader of the thieves guild before, like while he was the count. So, and he takes care of the poor, which means it's again like it gets into the dubious morality of that. It's like he's kind of a good person, but still he is a thief, and he is to like selfish motivations for like all the things he does. But at the same time, like the Hieronymus Lex, who like everyone makes fun of, is 100% right. The Thieves Guild is around. The Grey Fox is real. I'm fair. It shows that the Grey Fox doesn't hold a grudge that he like takes Hieronymus Lex into his service after he lifts the curse. But like, and this isn't me saying anything about what actual like life is like, or that Bethesda was implying this when they were writing the story. But like, if you look at like mythology, like even like the story of Odysseus, like a man leaving, like disappearing, and leaving his sort of kingdom in the hands of his wife, and then that's sort of like being in a decline. Like even if she's a strong leader who's like respecting him and like not even like taking on another like heir or husband, is like sort of a sign of decline. And like when he comes back, it's then a renewal of like he's managed to cast away this persona, this old way that he's been doing his life because he was trapped in it. This sort of cycle of the Grey Fox of taking the cowl and then you're erased from history. He does that, and the anvil starts to prosper again. That's not me saying anything about actual politics or life. That's like a mythological root there. It's like symbolically. And the Dark Brotherhood, another vast empire, which has it has supposedly sanctuaries in like every city. Obviously, the scale of Oblivion doesn't attribute that, but like reasonably speaking, they have like a vast network of spies, power. They have the dark. Sorry, they have the Night Mother guiding them with that sort of divine essence, giving them their contracts, and but even they, this sort of elite group, will just sort of take in anyone. And the fact that you are recruited, like you obviously have to prove yourself, but they offer you a place if you just murder anyone. They can sense if you murder someone, they will come to you, they'll say, hey, good job. They'll offer you a Rufio contract. And then if you're skilled enough to get through that, you're hired. They give you access to their sanctuary. Very little background check. It's like, oh, you're one of us now. Which sort of explains how Matthew Belmont got so high up in the organization that he was able to like get into the Black Hand itself, to tear it down from the inside. That they're very prideful. They will take in people who they probably should not take in because they're like, oh, we're the Dark Brotherhood, we're unstoppable. And I think the Khajiit in the Cheydinhal Sanctuary is the only one. What's his name? Like Razada? He's like the only one who's like sort of wary of you, but he's sort of treated a bit like someone who's like it's another thing like classically, oh, we want to keep the outsiders out, so he's like protective, but then he warms up to you right before you murder him, which is just good storytelling. And it's like again, like they're suffering. They are brought down by the fact that they took out this contract on this boy's mother, and that boy was very motivated to like join the Dark Brotherhood and tear it down from the inside, which shows again they don't exactly have the strictest of background checks. This system and society has been like around for so long and has been unchallenged. Eventually the cracks start showing. The sort of the end of this age of way of doing things. And then, of course, that's shown in the Shivering Isles as well, with the whole Grey March. Sheogorath has been stuck in this cycle of, ruling this madhouse. Then he gets turned back into Jiggalag, and he tears the whole thing down, only to be turned back into Sheogorath and like waste away. Like, oh my god, what have I done? I destroyed everything that I quote unquote loved. Um, and his kingdom is just gone, and so he requires you, an outsider, to come in, break up that cycle, stop the sort of cycle of him destroying everything by, you don't actually kill him, but you like beat some sense into him, and then you become Sheogorath. So again, even there, like you become the leader of all these guilds, and you become Sheogorath, and you're taking up this mantle of this renewal, and you stop it. And that brings us up to like the main story of the Mythic Dawn. What is Mankar Cameron trying to do? He's trying to basically bring Tamriel back to zero. He sees that there being like this great cosmic original sin, this like wrong, like Lorcan being overthrown, and he wants to like reset that, give the world back to Mehrunes Dagon, because he just sees it as any other realm of Oblivion, this realm of change. Because nothing can stay the same, because if everything was the same, you see that with like even in Oblivion, like it changes so much that nothing can survive. So Tamriel is kind of like this stable point where things are just stable enough for things to survive, but things are also constantly in flux. And so when he's like, oh, I want to bring back the Mythic Dawn, like restore Tamriel to a more primal state, because of like the millennia or ages of decay, as he sees it, even though they've sort of like, it's a bit like Numenor. They sort of like at the grand, like as it approaches, sort of like under Sauron's control, the deepest darkness that it ever reaches, sort of the evil, the heart of evil. It also grows in might and stature. Alfarazan the Golden like assembles an army which could threaten Numenor, now can threaten Valinor itself. So even though the Empire has like risen to such great heights to conquer the whole of Tamriel, even still, it's like he sort of sees it as this corruption of how things could and should be. And you even see like the world is not stable. Like there's even rumors about like the rise of the Aldemari Dominion in the Somerset Isles. There's rumors of like violence up in the north with the Nords. Like everything is like, things are not exactly the most stable. Like the overthrow of the tribunal in Morrowind as well, another sort of ending of an age, like there, and the destruction that Red Mountain brings. So him being like, I'm going to kill the Emperor, take the amulet, and we're just going to tear down the barriers that guard Tamriel, Nirn, from the rest of Oblivion, and then sort of, we'll make things right again. And even you are not like an agent of like the status quo, even though you kind of are, because instead of you becoming like the Emperor, you find Martin, who's like definitely a different kind of an emperor. Instead of being raised, he's a bastard son, which shows the mild corruption in Uriel's soul. Like, why does he have a bastard son? Unless he like saw the future that he'd need him. But like, he's been raised as a priest in Kavach, and then he's brought in and he's sort of sown his destiny, and he rises to the occasion. And he doesn't even like, he sacrifices himself. He doesn't like just become emperor and relight them. He has to sacrifice himself, sort of like this, like almost like Christ-like sacrifice of like saving the world, and sort of forming a new testament, a more permanent testament that will keep the world safe indefinitely forever. The gates of Oblivion will be shut permanently this time. We don't need to constantly be reigniting them. But he dies, and so he can't be emperor. Like the line of Tiber Septim was broken, I think, basically immediately. Like his cousin takes over. Like I think it was around Pelagius III. Like the direct line of Tiber Septim was always more of a ceremonial thing. It's been broken for a long time, but now it's gone over to the Mede Empire now. Well, obviously after the events of the game. So this is really like this is a constant thing. Like every aspect of the game sort of shows us a society which is like risen up to immense heights and is now like at its precipice is teetering on the edge, and it can either fall into that deep oblivion, that abyss, or it can sort of renew itself. It can sort of, you know, reignite itself. Sort of like these cycles that they've been stuck in, they can end them and move on to something new, which I think the Empire actually rejects by the end. Like it just assigns a new emperor, the Mede dynasty, and then obviously the Old Merry Dominion comes in. Their supposed theorized plan is break down the cycles of the world in total, kind of similar to how Mankar wanted to break down the sort of chains of the world. Sort of like going Mankar wants to like go top to bottom. I think supposedly the Thalmor want to go bottom to top, break down the foundations, which because like a lot of these sort of, even though there's cycles of renewal, they're like, instead of actually changing anything, they're sort of just like top coating a new coat of paint over the systems, which is why soon after the Dark Brotherhood goes into severe decline during the Thalmor Imperial War, is reduced to basically nothing. That's why the blades are reduced to basically nothing, and it sort of sets the whole stage for Skyrim to be like, oh, Alduin, you should have ended the world, but he didn't. And yeah, it's sort of like, it's a commonly accepted idea that Mehrunes Dagon kind of won because he's the prince of destruction, but he's also the prince of revolution. So the sort of the turning of the wheel again is sort of like he does succeed. He brings about an immense amount of change, even if it isn't like the most amount of change that he would have wanted. But if he did like fully overthrow Nirn, it would just become part of the Deadlands, and that would be like meaningless. Mankar Cameron's own personal philosophy is basically the equivalent of suffering to grow. So maybe he like sees it as that, sort of like bringing about this great suffering in Nirn will like force it to grow. Sort of this hardship will sort of like force it to evolve. Very kind of primal, anarchistic evolution, primalism, which I think like these themes are pretty pervasive throughout like every storyline in the game. Like even like the player homes are like, oh, these once great and grand places. Like even Battlehorn Castle is like, oh, the Lord Kevin is dead. We gotta, he was once grand, and you, the player, can make it grand again by being sort of this agent of positive change, having agency, going out in the world, doing good, helping people. You can sort of bring life back to this sort of destroyed remnants of a castle, or this spire, or this county, or like the entire empire, this world. It can be restored. We even see this in the Knights of the Nine DLC with like, oh, this sort of this ancient past like was like left unfinished, and you sort of have to take up the mantle of Pelinal Whitestrake to bring down Umaril. And you're restoring the Knights of the Nine, you're restoring their chapel, you're restoring everything basically. And yeah, so I think being in like every single storyline in the game, I feel like it sort of has to be an intentional detail that like this is kind of like, oh, what we're going for, what we want to be sort of like having here as like a crux, a through line, which I feel like a lot of people like talk about Oblivion as like, oh, they talk about a lot of things like Fallout New Vegas as well. They sort of like focus on like the grand details, like, oh, why this game is fun to play, why this game is like well designed, and like the politics. But like thematically speaking, what is the story about here? And that's what I'm kind of looking at here. Like it's about this end of ages. Like the opening monologue is like, for something 87 years, I've been Tambriel's emperor, but I've never been the ruler of my own dreams. It's like even like the top guy, the emperor, is not fully in control of his own destiny. He sort of has to like put it into the hands of the next generation, which is kind of symbolic of the remaster. That, like, you know, we're like preserving what made it wonderful, but we're also like giving it that ability to like be enjoyed by the next generation of people. But at the same time, you know, it's like it's like what has come before. Like, are we gonna move the wheel forward into like what comes next? The Elder Scrolls 6, hopefully, at some point. I don't think Morrowind could be remastered, but like the system's like so different, especially like the dialogue and like the game mechanics. Like they preserved Oblivion's engine, but like a lot of people do not like Morrowind's engine. But, you know, Morrowind also has like a lot of these sort of themes of like end of ages, unavoidable destinies, and, you know, it's a classic kind of fantasy theme of like going back into the ancient and sort of correcting mistakes that should never have been made. And yeah, Oblivion, probably one of my favorite games of all time. I think maybe the first major game I ever really started playing. First major RPG, anyway. Only RPG that simultaneously like moderate enough that I was enjoying it, but also my computer was actually able to run it. My brother showed it to me. I remember just sort of watching him play it, and it's like, why are there these cat people just everywhere? That is very weird. But it's an incredible game. I'm really happy with the remaster. I can't wait to get around to playing it. And yeah, I hope you guys have found this ramble kind of insightful. And yeah, thanks for watching. Until next time.
I have waited a long time for you, champion of old Tamriel. You were the last gasp of a dying age. You breathed the stale air of false hope. How little you understand. You cannot stop Lord Dagon. The walls between our worlds are crumbling. The mythic dawn grows nearer with every rift in the firmament. Soon, very soon, the lines now blurred will be erased. Tamriel and Oblivion rejoined, the mythic age reborn. Lord Dagon shall walk Tamriel again. The world shall be remade. The new age shall rise from the ashes of the old. My vision shall be realized. Weakness will be purged from the world, and mortal and immortal alike purified in the refiner's fire. My long duel with the Septims is over, and I have the mastery. The Emperor is dead. The Amulet of Kings is mine. And the last defender of the last ragged Septim stands before me, in the heart of my power. Let us see who at last has proved the stronger.